Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to make the Penicillin, which is a Scotch Whisky sour, and I think at this point we can call it a modern classic. Now, just like any drink recipe, the Penicillin is going to change depending upon what brand of spirit you use, and I think that's a really good thing, and it gives room for creativity and personal preference, right? But the thing about this recipe is that there's one other aspect to the drink that most people honestly just... they cut corners, man. But today, I want to show you the way this was originally made. And if you get this part right, you'll really understand why it's called the Penicillin. Because this baby will cure what ails you. Let's mix it up. Although this recipe comes to us via Regarding Cocktails by Sasha Petraske, it was invented by Sam Ross, an Australian by birth and by far the most famous of the Petraske protégés. Sam has invented several of the best modern classic cocktails, including the Paper Plane, the American Trilogy, and of course, the Penicillin. Choosing the right whiskeys for this drink starts with a good blended Scotch. I have here a near-bottom shelf Highland blend called Naked Grouse, a slightly sweeter and perhaps more interesting version of Famous Grouse. This will serve as the backbone of the drink. Other great options might include offerings from Dewar's, Johnnie Walker, Chivas Regal, or my personal favorite budget Speyside blend, Monkey Shoulder. This whiskey will work in tandem with a smoky Islay Scotch. Popular options include Ardbeg, Lagavulin, or Lafroig. But today, I'm using a dirt-cheap Islay that my wife grabbed for me from Trader Joe's. Don't be scared to try the bottom shelf when choosing an Islay for this recipe. It's merely an accent flavor, and it doesn't need to upstage the other ingredients. Now, as I so confidently stated in the introduction, people try to cut corners on this recipe, and here's where that happens. On the left, we have a 3-to-1 honey syrup. Easy enough. But on the right is a 1-to-1 fresh ginger juice simple syrup that will just about melt your freaking face off. The thing is, anyone can make a 3-to-1 honey syrup, but almost nobody is willing to take the trouble of fresh squeezing ginger to make ginger syrup, because to be frank, it's a pain in the neck. But it makes all the difference in the world as it plays off the medicinal flavors of honey, lemon, and Scotch. It tastes like it will kill what ails you, or maybe I should say mend what ails you. But that's why this drink is called the Penicillin. Now, I'm not saying that you have to make this syrup, but having had it both ways, I am saying that it's worth it. And here's how to do it. Grab a large chunk of ginger and chop it into smallish pieces. Add it to a blender device of your choice and blitz it completely, which takes a bit of time and elbow grease, to be honest. Once utterly pulverized, you'll be left with a surprisingly juicy pulp. This pulp then needs to be strained out using a nut milk bag or similar device. I have here a small bag designed for straining out seeds when making jam to turn jam into jelly. This is best done over a scale, as once you've finished pressing and squeezing, you'll need to add an equal amount of white sugar by weight. This in turn is then blended to dissolve the sugar, as any heating would kill the fire of the ginger, which is where most commercial syrups fall flat. And oh my, you have never really tasted ginger until you've had this syrup. But now we are ready to assemble. We need equal parts of our two syrups totaling 3/4 of an ounce, which comes to 3/8 of an ounce each. My jigger has 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4 ounce lines. I've yet to see a jigger with 3/8 ounce lines built in, so the best way to do this is to guesstimate by aiming to reach halfway between the 1/4 ounce and 1/2 ounce lines. By carefully measuring each to the same spot, you get the correct balance of flavor. If you're going to combine the syrups in the jigger like I'm doing here so that I've reached 3/4 of an ounce in total syrup, and this helps to prevent adding too much sweetness by potentially overpouring both syrups, maybe just err on the side of more honey so you don't crack your rocks glass from the heat of adding too much ginger. You think I'm kidding. Next, 3/4 of an ounce of fresh lemon juice, 2 ounces of blended Scotch with the Islay reserved until later. Add some ice. I have some odds and ends from breaking up a large block, but in general go with 2 large cubes, one cracked and one whole, and shake the living hell out of it. Add a large rock to a frozen lowball glass and strain the cocktail into the glass. Next, add about 1/4 to 1/2 ounce of Islay Scotch so that it carefully layers on top. Add a piece or two of candied ginger as garnish, and that is the Penicillin. All right, well, as you can see, things are a little bit different in the surrounding. You might even notice I've got my braces off, and we'll get to all that, but first, I have a delicious drink here that needs to be tasted, so cheers. Oh man, I haven't had one of these in a while. It's such an interesting sour because it starts out with that Isla just in your face, strong kind of tire fire, peat smoke. As the drink progresses, as you kind of drink some of that off, you get a lower and lower percentage of that Isla, and you start to get more of the ginger and the honey coming through. So let's go for another sip. Ooh, man, tastes like medicine in the best way possible. All right, so as you can see, this is not the same drink. If you can tell, it's the same glass, same shirt, same outfit, but you can see this is using ice from an ice maker, not that beautiful clear rock of ice that I was using in the earlier part of the video. But otherwise, this is made the exact same way. I just fresh made some of that ginger syrup and some honey syrup. I used that same Naked Grouse Scotch as the main sort of backbone of the drink. However, I did use a different Isla because I drank all of that other stuff. It's actually been a while since I filmed the initial video, and we'll get to that in a second. What I'm using here today is this Kilcolman. I don't really know how to say Gaelic names or Scottish names. They're just a good way to get in trouble trying to pronounce that stuff properly. But this is the Kilcolman Isla single malt Scotch whiskey. I can get that to focus for you. This is a rather light, dry kind of Isla, kind of a middle of the road as far as the smoke. It doesn't have a lot of that meaty characteristic that you might get with a Lagavulin, especially some of the more aged ones. This one doesn't have an age statement on it, and I looked it up once, but I kind of think of this as if a Japanese whiskey tried to make an Isla. I think that's kind of how it would turn out. As you can see, it's very light in color. Great whiskey. So despite the fact that the ginger is unbelievably potent and powerful, I mean, it was making my eyes water when I was grinding up the ginger to make this syrup just, what, 20 minutes ago. It doesn't hurt you in this drink. Because you're only using 3/8 of an ounce or thereabouts, it blends so well with the honey, and you don't taste honey, ginger, Scotch. They become one in the drink. And as you sip through it, like I said, the Isla will kind of come down in its prominence. When you start out, it feels very stiff, very strong, kind of like an old fashioned, how it will be very spirit forward at the beginning, but if you sip on it over a period of time, it's gonna dilute more, it's gonna sweeten as it dissolves more of the granulated sugar. This has a similar effect. It doesn't technically get sweeter, but as you drink off some of that Isla, it feels like it's becoming sweeter. It's just such a brilliant recipe because the balance of flavors mutually reinforce one another. The ginger doesn't fight with the honey. Neither one of them are strong enough to overpower the blended Scotch that is kind of the heart and soul of this drink. And I've messed around with the ratios of honey and ginger and even the lemon juice, and I don't think you can improve on the ratio of the original recipe of 3/4 to a cumulative 3/4 lemon juice to syrup. It's perfect. It doesn't hurt the Scotch, it doesn't overwhelm the Scotch, but it also doesn't taste too spirit forward, especially once you get through some of the Isla. It's such a intriguing and interesting drink, and the ginger tastes so fresh and present. This has gotta be it's my favorite whiskey cocktail. I mean, bourbon is my favorite style of whiskey, but the Penicillin is my favorite whiskey cocktail because it's so well balanced, it's so interesting, there's enough fire, but sweetness, it's got a floral characteristic from the honey, but you still retain all of the flavor of the Scotch. And this might surprise some people, but using different kinds of blended Scotch from different regions will radically change the nature of the drink. So like I said earlier during the voiceover, I think Monkey Shoulder is one of my favorites, and it's a kind of malty, sweet, Speyside blend, right? When you use that as opposed to that Highland blend, the Naked Grouse, it tastes very different, right? The cocktail really responds well to the different kinds of whiskey that you use. I think my favorite is the Monkey Shoulder. My second favorite would probably be the Naked Grouse. I've also used Dewar's, Johnny Walker. I like the malty sweetness of that Speyside, and so personally, I would recommend going in that direction for the main whiskey, for the blended whiskey, for this recipe. Oh, it gets better and better as you sip on it. And some people might freak out on me on this, but it really doesn't matter what Isla you use. The main point of it is to have a smoky, sharp, dry flavor. Dry meaning low perceived sweetness, but it doesn't need to be expensive. I mean, Lefroy would be wonderful, but you don't have to spend that kind of money. You don't have to spend this kind of money either. It's not necessary. But it doesn't hurt to buy a nice whiskey like this either. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Although let's talk about the room, okay? If you've been watching the channel for a while, you may have figured out that all of my videos have been filmed, except for the very earliest ones, they were filmed in an RV. That's because my wife and I lived in an RV for 16, 17 months while we were building our house. Now, this is not my house, this is actually my music studio, because if you don't know, I'm a music teacher, specifically guitar and ukulele. I have a couple albums on Spotify and tons of YouTube videos on a separate channel, instructional videos, but mostly live performances. So that's my bread and butter. I'm not a professional cocktailian yet, someday. So the reason I'm filming the tasting video here in this space as opposed to back when we were living in the RV, which was, I probably filmed the original part of the video 18 months ago, something like that. For the last 6 months of it, every week I would crank out 3 or 4 videos as far as the production part of it. The post-production was taking a long time because my computer just couldn't handle running the software anymore, which, by the way, is DaVinci Resolve. And then my hard drive crashed and corrupted my video files, and so I had to buy another hard drive and extract all the files that I could and then reorganize them, and it was this whole big thing. And so that's why I went radio silent for a while on the channel, and that's why now I'm refilming the tasting today, because that particular video file got corrupted and I couldn't recover it. So there will be a couple other videos that this happened where the tasting part, for some reason it always seems to be the tasting part, that got corrupted and lost, which is probably the best situation, honestly, if I'm gonna lose a part of the video file. But anyway, I digress. Occasionally there will be these tasting segments that are much more recent than the original filming of the video. Again, those are 18 months to 2 years old at this point, and when I work through the backlog of old videos that I have, then I'm gonna start filming here in my music studio, and I've got some great plans for the future of this channel. It'd be great if I could start making some money from it, then I could justify, spending more time and money on it. But until that day comes, we're just gonna keep chugging through the old video files that we have. If you watched all the way through this, I really appreciate it. You are probably a super fan, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.